All right, welcome back to ABA Exam Review and the continuation of our RBT Practice Exam series, where we're going through the next set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. As always, when you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. A skill acquisition plan says, if the learner does not respond to the first SD, you should use most to least prompting following the next SD. This applies to all skill targets. What type of prompting would you use first if there were no other instructions? So as always, we want to ask ourselves, what do we know? What do we know about this question? We're never jumping right to the answer choices. We're evaluating the question first. So the question is asking us, what type of prompting are we going to use if there are no other instructions? So given this information, what type of prompting would you use first? So we know the plan says, if the learner does not respond to the first SD, you should use most to least prompting following the next SD. So obviously we're going to be using most to least prompting. Now, where this gets more challenging is, what is the first type of prompting used in most to least? Because when we talk about most to least prompting, we're going from the most intrusive prompt possible, where we're trying to prevent any sort of mistakes, to the least type of prompting, which is no prompting at all. So if you're going most to least, what is the most intrusive type of prompt? Is it A, errorless learning, B, graduated guidance, C, full physical, or D, modeling? Well, it's not going to be modeling, because modeling does not involve physical prompts, and physical prompts are much more intrusive than modeling. So we can get rid of D. Now, what's the difference between full physical and graduated guidance? Well, with full physical, you are essentially hand over handing or physically guiding the learner to do the skill. With graduated guidance, you're only using as much physical prompting as necessary and then immediately fading it. So in the hierarchy, full physical is more intrusive than graduated guidance, because with graduated guidance, you're fading a lot quicker and you're only using as much as necessary. But then you have errorless learning, and errorless learning is actually the first step in most to least prompting, because with errorless learning, you aren't allowing mistakes to happen at all. So however much prompting you need to use to prevent errors is what you're going to use in errorless learning. So if you're going to start with most to least prompting and you have no other instructions, then errorless learning is where you're going to begin. Errorless learning is the most intrusive type of prompt because you are eliminating mistakes entirely. You're prompting to the point where you do not allow mistakes to happen. So what type of prompting would you use first if no other instructions besides most to least prompting were given? Well, you would use A, errorless learning. Paul's brother steals snacks from Paul's room, even though Paul has asked him to stop. Paul hooked up an alarm to his room, which goes off anytime someone tries to go in without permission. The stealing has drastically decreased since the alarm was installed. Why? Question is asking why. Why what? Well, why has the stealing decreased since the alarm was installed? So immediately when you see this word decreased, when we're talking about behavior, because we're talking about stealing, we're talking about Paul's brother stealing, and Paul's brother's stealing has decreased. So what leads to a decrease in behavior? Well, extinction or punishment. If behavior is increasing, we're talking reinforcement. So as soon as you see that word decreased in regard to a behavior, you should start thinking, okay, this is likely punishment or extinction. Now, let's read a little deeper. Paul's brother steals snacks, even though Paul asked him to stop. Paul hooked up the alarm, which goes off when someone tries to go in without permission. So the consequence is what? The consequence is the alarm going off. So as soon as Paul's brother tries to go in without permission, the alarm goes off. So is something being added or taken away from the environment? Well, something is being added. The alarm is being added as the consequence. And so if we're decreasing behavior by adding something, what is that called? A, positive reinforcement. Well, it is positive because the alarm is the consequence, is the stimulus being added to the environment, but we're decreasing behavior. So it's not reinforcement, it is punishment. So B, positive punishment, is much more what we're looking for. We're adding the alarm. That's the consequence. Punishment is decreasing. Why is it not C or D? Why is it not negative reinforcement or negative punishment? Well, negative means we've taken something away as a consequence. If Paul's brother tries to go in without permission, what's the consequence? The alarm sounds. The alarm is added to the environment. Nothing's taken away. We've added a stimulus to the environment, making it positive. So we're looking at positive punishment as the reason the behavior is decreasing. Go through consequence questions that methodically and slowly at first, especially if you just started studying. Eventually, you're going to get very good at them, and you're going to be able to solve them very quickly. But you want to go slowly first. A family is riding in the car listening to music during the holidays. The dad asks, "What song do you want next?" and puts on whatever song is requested by the children. If the dad was teaching, what type of teaching would this be? So when we think about teaching as behavior technicians, think about two primary types. Think about discrete trial teaching and think about naturalistic teaching. And with discrete trial teaching, we are teaching very rapidly. We're teaching in a very controlled and contrived manner. With naturalistic teaching, we're just using what's naturally occurring in the environment to teach. In this case, this family's just riding in the car, listening to music. And as they're going, the dad says, "Well, what song do you want next?" And if the kids respond with the song, he puts the song on, likely as some type of reinforcement. So he's just using this naturally occurring situation to teach his kids. So what type of teaching would this be? A, discrete trial teaching. Well, it's not discrete trial teaching. Discrete trial teaching has a clear beginning, clear end. It's rapid. It's followed with pauses. It's very obvious when we're using discrete trial teaching. This is much more related to naturalistic teaching, or also known as B, incidental teaching. Naturalistic teaching and incidental teaching are the same thing. They're interchangeable. If you see incidental teaching, think naturalistic. Now, what about C, functional communication training? Is the dad also teaching functional communication? Well, he is, because he's communicating with his kids, and when the kids communicate back in a functional way, he reinforces. So the dad is teaching not only incidentally or naturally, but he's also teaching functional communication. So really, this could be both B and C, naturally teaching functional communication. Your daughter receives a tea set from her aunt in the mail. When you open it, your wife tells you to throw away all the tiny pieces so that there aren't any choking hazards. This is likely what type of intervention? We're looking at the type of intervention in this question. What do we know? We know the daughter received a tea set. You opened it. Your wife said, throw away all the tiny pieces so there aren't any choking hazards. So when you're asking about this, you have to think about, what are we trying to accomplish here? Well, the wife wants to prevent choking. And see that word prevent. That word is key. Because when we think about what type of intervention this is, the wife is trying to prevent something. She's trying to prevent choking. So we look at our answer choices. We have antecedent intervention, consequent intervention, and reactive intervention. Now, an antecedent intervention, is that reactive or proactive in the sense of preventing or reacting to a behavior? Well, you're trying to prevent a behavior with an antecedent intervention. You're trying to be proactive. And so with the wife here, she's being proactive in the sense of she wants to prevent choking. A consequence intervention would be, if the daughter was choking on the small pieces, then you take the tiny pieces away. We're not reacting here. We're working in a preventative way. We're working in a proactive way. And so reactive interventions are the same as consequence. You're reacting to the situation. The wife in this case, she's being proactive. She's being preventative. So she's trying to use an antecedent intervention to prevent future choking. Think about the difference. Think about it slowly. Really think about, why is an antecedent intervention preventative? Why is it proactive? And why is a consequence intervention reactive? And really think about that on a behavioral level. What is the wife trying to accomplish? She wants to prevent choking. So to do that, she's got to react, or she has to prevent the choking by being proactive and changing the environment before the response occurs. And that's what an antecedent intervention is, doing something prior to the response occurring. Donnie is starting to understand the concept of quiet time. Quiet time is where Donnie gives his mom a brief moment of relaxation and entertains himself. If Donnie's mom wanted to increase each segment of quiet time, what is likely the best measurement to use? So we have a measurement question. And what are we measuring? We're measuring these segments of quiet time. So what's our goal with this measurement? We want to increase segments of quiet time because Donnie's mom wants relaxation. So what's the best measurement to use here? Not too challenging of a question. If you look at A, frequency is a count. So we're counting something. Are we counting something here? We're not increasing how many segments she gets, but each individual segment. So it's not how many, but it's the length. So we're looking at time here. We're not looking at frequency. What about rate? Well, rate involves frequency plus time. The frequency is not important because if Donnie's mom gets 105-second relaxation moments, it's not necessarily what we're talking about here. She just wants each time she gets quiet time to be longer. And so we're trying to extend the time. So what we're looking at really is the duration of each segment. So if we want to increase each segment, we need to increase each duration. What is latency? Well, latency is the time in between the SD and the first response. And we're not trying to increase the time between the SD and the start of quiet time. We're saying once quiet time begins, we want to increase how long that quiet time lasts. So how long Donnie can entertain himself and let his mom relax. Not how many quiet time segments we get or how many per hour, but how long each segment lasts. So the best measurement to use here will be duration. We want to increase the duration of each quiet time segment. Which of the following definitions would be most appropriate for elopement? When you get a definition question, you have to think in terms of operationalizing behavior. When we operationalize something, we're trying to be as specific as possible about what we're trying to measure. You want to be objective. You want to be observable, something that can be measured. If possible, include the function. If possible, include a non-example. The more detail, the better, and is what we're really going for. We're also trying to avoid things like anger and boredom and frustration, things that are subjective and not measurable. So let's look at A. Elopement is defined as any time the client runs away. Now, that definition is a definition. It's fine. But if I looked at that and you looked at that and someone else looked at that, we might interpret that differently. You've got to be much more specific than A. Let's look at B. Elopement is defined as any time the client leaves the designated area for more than 10 seconds and occurs for escape. If the client leaves for less than 10 seconds, it is not elopement. So let's look at each piece here. We have the definition, anytime the client leaves the area for more than 10 seconds. We have the function, occurs for escape, and we have a non-example. This is very objective, it's measurable, and multiple people could read this definition and get an idea of what we're looking for. B looks pretty good. What about C? Elopement is when the client starts to exhibit anger or frustration and leaves the work area for more than 10 seconds and occurs for escape. Less than 10 seconds is not elopement. Everything is okay here. It's just like B, except we have these anger and frustration terms in here. We can't objectively measure anger and frustration. Can't include those in definitions because that can change every day. People hide anger, people hide frustration. It looks different each day. I might think it's different than what you think. C is not as objective as B. So C is not as good as B. And then D, elopement occurs for escape. Elopement is not when the client leaves for less than 10 seconds at a time. D's not bad. We just don't have the actual definition. So it's not as complete as B. So the best answer here is B. Now, that might seem overly specific and very strict, but when defining behavior, you want to be specific. You want to be as specific as possible because that definition is what you're going to be measuring and what your other technicians and your other team members are going to be measuring. So you got to be very specific, objective, measurable, clear, concise when making definitions. And then finally, if you're conducting a standard discrete trial, teaching in which order should each step occur? So what is this question asking? It's just asking, what is the order of discrete trial teaching? What is the proper way to use or to do discrete trial teaching? Because remember, discrete trial teaching has a clear beginning and clear end. It's quick and it's very obvious when each trial begins and when each trial ends. So let's look at our orders. A, B, C, and D. I'll start with an SD, which is great. We then have A, which prompt is second, and so is C, which is fine. You look at B, though, the response comes before the prompt. And does the prompt follow the response or does the prompt come before? Well, the prompt always comes before the response. So B is out. What about D? Does the consequence come before the response? Of course not. So we can eliminate B. We can eliminate D. Now you look at A, we have SD, prompt, consequence. Same issue as D. Consequence does not come before the response. So that leaves us with C. The right order in our discrete trial teaching is you give the instruction, you prompt if necessary, there's a response, you give the consequence, whether that's reinforcement or feedback, you pause, you start over. That is discrete trial teaching. Thank you for watching. Check out btexamreview.com and subscribe on YouTube to support us and get all of our updates. As always, when you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.